The fluorescent lights of the Greyhound station buzzed like a hive of tired bees, casting a pale glow over the cracked linoleum floor. Daniel Harper stood in the snaking line, his 3-year-old daughter, Lily, slumped against his shoulder, her tiny breaths warm against his neck. His backpack, stuffed with everything they owned, dug into his spine. He shifted her weight, ignoring the ache in his arms. At 32, he felt a decade older, worn down by life's relentless punches. 2 years ago, he'd been a mechanic with a steady job, a small apartment, and a wife who swore she'd stick by him. Now, he was a single dad, jobless, with $47 in his wallet and a one-way ticket to Chicago, chasing a lead on a garage job that might not even pan out. The line inched forward. Daniel's eyes darted to the clock above the ticket counter, 9:47 p.m. The bus to Chicago was boarding in 13 minutes. He tightened his grip on Lily, her curls tickling his chin. She stirred, mumbling something about blankie, her favorite tattered blanket tucked inside the backpack. He whispered, "We're almost there, kiddo," though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. The station smelled of stale coffee and diesel fumes, the air thick with the murmurs of strangers, some heading to new lives, others running from old ones. Daniel knew he was in the latter camp. After Sarah left, taking half his heart and most of their savings, he'd spiraled. Layoffs followed, then eviction. He'd couch-surfed with friends until pride forced him to stop. Chicago was his last shot, a tip from an old buddy about a shop needing a skilled hand. If it fell through, he didn't know what he'd do. Feed Lily, keep her safe. That was all that mattered. The ticket agent, a woman with a pinched face and a name tag reading Gladys, waved him forward. He handed over the crumpled ticket, purchased with the last of his cash. She barely glanced at it, stamping it with a thud. "Gate 7. Don't be late." He nodded, hoisting the backpack higher and weaving through the crowd. Lily's sneakers dangled against his chest, one untied shoelace flapping. Gate 7 was a chaotic knot of people, luggage, and shouted goodbyes. The bus, a hulking silver beast, idled under a flickering street lamp. Daniel joined the boarding line, his stomach twisting. He hadn't eaten since the gas station sandwich he'd split with Lily at noon, but hunger was an old friend now. The driver, a burly man with a graying beard, checked tickets with mechanical efficiency. Daniel handed his over, and the driver pointed to the bus's open door. "Seats are first come, first serve. Good luck." Daniel climbed aboard, the steps creaking under his weight. The bus smelled of vinyl and air freshener, the kind that tried too hard to mask something worse. Rows of seats stretched into the dimness, most already claimed. He scanned for an empty spot, his heart sinking. Families, couples, and solo travelers filled the rows, their bags and coats sprawled like territorial flags. Lily whimpered, sensing his tension. Near the back, he spotted a single empty seat beside a woman in a navy coat, her face half hidden by a scarf. She was staring out the window, a paperback novel open on her lap. The seat next to her held a small leather bag, but it looked movable. Relief flickered in Daniel's chest. He shuffled down the aisle, dodging elbows and overstuffed carry-ons. "Excuse me," he said, voice rough from exhaustion. "Is this seat taken?" The woman turned, her eyes meeting his. She was older than he'd expected, maybe in her late 50s, with warm brown skin and laugh lines framing her face. Her scarf slipped, revealing a silver cross necklace glinting in the overhead light. She studied him for a moment, taking in his disheveled jacket, the sleeping child in his arms, the desperation in his posture. "I saved that spot for you," she said, her voice low but clear, like she'd been expecting him. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. You did?" She smiled, small but genuine, and moved the leather bag to her lap. "Sit. You look like you need it." He hesitated, unsure if she was joking or mistaken. But the bus lurched as the driver started the engine, and Lily stirred, her tiny hand clutching his collar. He didn't have time to question it. He slid into the seat, settling Lily on his lap. The backpack thudded to the floor between his feet. "Thanks," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Kindness from strangers always made him uneasy, like a debt he couldn't repay. The woman nodded, returning to her book. The cover read, "The Alchemist," by Paulo Coelho, its edges worn from use. Daniel glanced at her, curious despite himself. She didn't seem like the type to save seats for random guys with kids. Her coat was neatly pressed, her nails manicured, a stark contrast to his own chipped hands, still stained with motor oil from his last gig. The bus pulled out of the station, tires humming against the pavement. Lily sighed in her sleep, her weight a comforting anchor. Daniel leaned back, the seat creaking. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red, fading as the bus merged onto the highway. Chicago was 10 hours away, assuming no delays. He tried to focus on the job prospect, mentally reciting the skills he'd list: diagnostics, engine repair, customer service. But doubt gnawed at him. What if the job was already filled? What if he wasn't good enough? "You're thinking too loud," the woman said, not looking up from her book. Daniel startled, a flush creeping up his neck. "Sorry, didn't mean to." She closed the book, marking her page with a folded receipt. "No need to apologize. I know that look, like you're carrying the world and it's about to slip." He didn't know how to respond. She wasn't wrong, but admitting it felt like exposing a wound. Instead, he adjusted Lily's position, brushing a curl from her face. "Just got a lot on my mind." She nodded, her gaze softening as she looked at Lily. "She's beautiful." "How old?" "3, he said, pride cutting through his fatigue. "Her name's Lily." "Lily," she repeated like it was a prayer. "That's a good name. Strong, like she'll bloom anywhere." Daniel managed a half smile. "Hope so." "I'm Esther," the woman said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her fingers cool against his calloused palm. "Daniel." He hesitated, then added, "Thanks again for the seat. Didn't expect it." Esther waved a hand. "I've been on enough buses to know who needs a break. Besides, I had a feeling." A feeling. He raised an eyebrow, unsure if she was eccentric or just overly kind. She chuckled, a sound like wind chimes. "Call it intuition. Or maybe I just like a good story. And you look like you've got one." He snorted, shaking his head. "Not a good one." "Those are the best kind," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The messy ones, they've got heart." He didn't know what to make of her. Part of him wanted to shut down, to keep his walls up. But there was something about Esther, her warmth, her directness, that made him feel seen, not judged. The bus rumbled on, the hum of the engine lulling Lily deeper into sleep. Daniel's eyelids grew heavy, but he fought it. Falling asleep meant letting his guard down, and he couldn't afford that. Esther seemed to sense his unease. She reached into her bag and pulled out a granola bar, offering it to him. "Eat. You're no good to her if you pass out." He stared at the bar, his pride warring with his hunger. "I'm fine." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Don't make me insist." Reluctantly, he took it, muttering a thanks. He tore open the wrapper and broke off a piece, the oats and honey tasting like a luxury. He saved half for Lily, tucking it into his pocket. Esther watched him, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, leaning back, "where you headed?" "Chicago," he said, swallowing. "Got a job lead. Mechanic work." "Good trade," she said. "Honest. You been at it long?" "Since I was 16, he said, surprised at how easily the words came. "Started in my dad's shop, fixing beaters. Never wanted to do anything else." She nodded like she understood. "And now you're starting over?" He shrugged. the weight of it settling on his shoulders. Something like that. Esther didn't push, just let the silence sit. It wasn't uncomfortable, though, not like the silences he was used to. Tense, heavy with things unsaid. Outside, the highway stretched into the dark, punctuated by the occasional glow of a rest stop or a passing truck. The other passengers were quiet, some sleeping, others lost in their own worlds. After a while, Esther spoke again. "You know, I wasn't always this put together." She gestured to her coat, her scarf, the book. "Used to be a mess running from one bad choice to another. Took a stranger's kindness to turn me around." Daniel glanced at her, curious. "What happened?" She smiled, but it was tinged with something bittersweet. "Long story, short version. I was 22, pregnant, no money, no plan. Got on a bus like this one, heading nowhere. Woman next to me saw I was falling apart. She didn't have much, but she gave me her lunch, her number, and a pep talk that stuck. Said I was stronger than I thought. Years later, I tracked her down to say thank you. She didn't even remember me." Daniel listened, the story settling into him like a stone in a river. "That's something." "It's everything," Esther said. "One moment, one person, it can change your whole path." He wanted to believe her, but hope was a dangerous thing. He'd had too many doors slammed in his face, too many promises broken. Still, her words lingered, like a song he couldn't quite shake. The bus hit a pothole, jostling Lily awake. She blinked, her brown eyes wide and confused. "Daddy, where are we?" "On a bus, sweetheart," he said, smoothing her hair. "Going to a new place." She rubbed her eyes, then noticed Esther. "Who's that?" "This is Esther," Daniel said. "She's a friend." Esther grinned, leaning closer. "Hi, Lily. You like stories?" Lily nodded shyly, clutching Daniel's shirt. "Well," Esther said, "I know a good one about a girl who could talk to stars. Want to hear it?" Lily's face lit up, and Daniel felt a pang of gratitude. He nodded, giving Esther permission. She began, her voice weaving a tale of a girl named Stella who whispered wishes to the night sky. Lily listened, rapt, her earlier fussiness forgotten. Daniel watched, marveling at how easily Esther connected with her, like she'd known her forever. As the story ended, Lily yawned, snuggling back against Daniel. "I like Stella," she mumbled, already half asleep. "Me too," Esther said, patting her hand. Daniel met Esther's eyes, his throat tight. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said simply. "Kids need stories. So do dads." He looked away, blinking hard. The bus rolled on, the miles slipping by. Esther returned to her book, but every so often she'd glance at him, like she was checking in. He didn't mind. For the first time in months, he didn't feel so alone. Around 2 a.m., the bus pulled into a rest stop, the neon glow of a diner cutting through the dark. The driver announced a 20-minute break. Passengers groaned, stretching as they shuffled off. Daniel debated staying put. Lily was asleep, and he didn't want to wake her. But his bladder had other ideas. He looked at Esther, who was slipping her book into her bag. "Mind watching her for a minute?" he asked, hating how vulnerable it made him feel. "I'll be quick." Esther nodded. No hesitation. "Go, she's safe with me." He lifted Lily gently, settling her on the seat with her blanket. Esther slid closer, a protective arm near the girl. Daniel hurried off the bus, the cold night air biting his skin. The rest stop was a blur of truckers, vending machines, and fluorescent lights. He used the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and checked his phone. No service, just a photo of Lily on the lock screen, grinning at a park they'd visited last summer. He clung to that image, a reminder of why he kept going. Back on the bus, he found Lily still asleep. Esther humming softly, her hand resting on the blanket. Relief washed over him. "Thanks," he said, sliding into his seat. "No trouble," Esther said. "She's an angel." The bus started up again, the driver muttering about staying on schedule. Daniel settled in, but his mind was restless. Esther's story about the stranger who'd helped her kept circling back. He wondered if this was his version of that moment, if Esther was the kind of person who changed paths without knowing it. "You ever think about paying it forward?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Esther tilted her head, considering. "All the time. That's why I'm here." He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice low. "I'm not just on this bus for a trip. I'm looking for someone." His pulse quickened, a prickle of unease. "Who?" She studied him, like she was weighing how much to say. "A man named Michael Harper, my brother. Haven't seen him in 20 years. Daniel froze, his heart slamming against his ribs. Harper wasn't a rare name, but the coincidence felt like a punch. "Harper?" he repeated, his voice barely audible. Esther's eyes narrowed, catching his reaction. "You know him?" He swallowed, his mouth dry. "Michael Harper was my dad." The words hung between them, heavy as stone. Esther's face shifted, shock, then something deeper, like a dam breaking. "Your dad," she whispered, her hand pressing against her chest. "You're Daniel?" He nodded, stunned. How did you know my name?" She laughed, a shaky sound, tears glistening in her eyes. "Because Michael talked about you, his boy. He was so proud, even when he was falling apart." Daniel's mind reeled. His dad had been a ghost in his life, a drunk who'd left when Daniel was 10, leaving him and his mom to scrape by. He'd heard Michael died years ago, a rumor from a distant cousin. But Esther, his sister, his aunt, the pieces didn't fit, not yet. "I don't understand," he said, his voice raw. "You're his sister?" Esther nodded, wiping her eyes. "Half-sister, different moms, same dad. Michael and I lost touch after he moved away. I've been trying to find him, or what was left of him. Then I saw you, with Lily, and I just knew." "Knew what?" he asked, his chest tight. "That you were family," she said. "Even before I knew your name. I felt it." He stared at her, the bus's hum fading to nothing. Family. The word felt foreign, like a language he'd forgotten. He'd been alone so long, just him and Lily against the world. Now this woman, this stranger who'd saved him a seat, was claiming a piece of his past. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" he asked, a hint of anger creeping in. "You let me sit here, not knowing—" "I wasn't sure," she said, her voice steady. "Not until you said his name. And I didn't want to scare you off. You looked like you were carrying enough." He clenched his jaw, torn between disbelief and a strange, aching hope. Lily stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and he softened, his hand resting on her back. "What do you want from me?" he asked, quieter now. Esther's smile was sad but warm. "Nothing you don't want to give. I just want to know you, Daniel. You and Lily. If you'll let me." He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to bolt, to keep his walls up, but another part, the part that was tired, that craved connection, wanted to believe her. The bus rolled on, the night stretching, endless before them. He thought of her story, the stranger who'd changed her life with a sandwich and a phone number. Maybe this was his chance to let someone in, to let kindness rewrite his story. "Okay," he said finally, the words small, but heavy. "We'll figure it out." Esther's face lit up, a tear slipping down her cheek. "That's enough for now." They sat in silence, but it was different now, charged with possibility. Lily woke as the sky began to lighten, her eyes bright, with curiosity. "Are we there yet?" she asked, looking from Daniel to Esther. "Almost," Esther said, her voice full of promise. "But we're together, and that's a start." Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Esther, his maybe aunt, his maybe family. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, fragile but real. Chicago was still hours away, the job still uncertain, but he wasn't alone anymore. And that, he realized, was enough to keep going. The bus crossed a bridge as dawn broke, the city skyline rising like a promise. Daniel held Lily close, Esther's presence a quiet strength beside him. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. A father, a daughter, and a woman who'd saved a seat for a reason she couldn't explain. But that changed everything.